It was the peak of summer in the small village of Surajpur. The sun blazed down mercilessly, with no clouds to soften its glare. The dusty roads shimmered like molten glass. The air itself felt heavy, as though the entire world was trapped inside a burning oven. The little breeze that sometimes passed through carried no relief, only hot, dry gusts that made breathing harder. The birds, too, had grown silent. Sparrows and crows sat motionless on power lines, their beaks open, gasping for air. Stray dogs lay lifeless in the shade of mud walls, their tongues hanging out, while cattle crowded near dried-up water troughs, searching for even a single drop. The once fragrant earth, which used to smell of fresh crops and flowers, now smelled of dust and despair. Life in Surajpur had slowed to a painful crawl. The village ponds, once bustling with children playing and women washing clothes, had turned into pits of cracked mud. Wells that had quenched the thirst of generations now stood useless, their depths dry. The fields, once full of life, had deep fissures that looked like scars. Farmers would sit under trees, staring at their barren lands with hopelessness in their eyes. "Nothing will grow here now," muttered Hariya, an old farmer, as he leaned on his wooden staff. "Even the soil is crying." Bamu, a man in his 30s with calloused hands, wiped the sweat from his forehead. "If it doesn't rain soon, even crying won't help," he replied, his voice heavy. In those days, stepping out during daylight felt like punishment. The sun was so fierce that even iron plows lying in the fields burned to the touch. Farmers started working only during dawn and dusk. In between, the village seemed like a ghost town. Doors stayed shut, curtains drawn, and families huddled inside their mud brick homes, trying desperately to escape the heat. Inside those homes, life was no better. Most villagers didn't own fans, and for those who did, power cuts made them useless. The sound of hand fans, palm leaf pockeys, flapping in slow, tired rhythms filled the silence. Children lay on woven cots, their faces pale, sipping warm water drop by drop. Women sweated near the clay stoves as they cooked whatever little food was left. But even food was a luxury. Vegetables spoiled quickly, milk turned sour in hours, and families began cutting down meals to survive. Many ate only once a day. The poorest families were hit hardest. Surajpur was already a struggling village, but this drought pushed it to the edge. Malnutrition was visible everywhere. Children with thin arms, sunken eyes, and protruding ribs, elderly people with wrinkled, tired faces who often gave up their food for their grandchildren. Yet no one could afford to stop working. Men and women alike labored under the blazing sun, knowing that a single missed day of wages could mean going to bed hungry. In the fields, workers often fainted, their clothes soaked in sweat. Villagers tried simple tricks to survive, tying wet cloths around their heads, placing damp mats on their doorways, or sprinkling water on mud floors to cool the house. But nothing seemed enough. Water had become a treasure more valuable than gold. Hand pumps that once gushed clean water now creaked uselessly. Wells stood empty. Women and children walked miles under the sun, carrying pots, only to return with muddy, contaminated water that often made them sick. One evening, as the men gathered under the village banyan tree, their faces burned from the heat, frustration boiled over. "This can't go on," said Ramu. "My children haven't had a proper drink in days." Another man, Bolu, spoke bitterly. "Yesterday, my wife fainted on the way back from the river. And for what? A pot of brown water." The old farmer, Hariya, sighed. "We are cursed, brothers. This is the worst summer I've seen in 60 years. But then came news that felt like a miracle. The local administration had finally announced emergency relief. Water tankers would be arriving in Surajpur. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, villagers lined up near the road with every bucket, jar, and pot they owned. Some had been waiting since midnight. The tanker arrived at noon, its horn echoing through the silent streets. A cheer went up as the giant white vehicle pulled in. But desperation turned the scene chaotic. People jostled, shouting, thrusting their containers forward. The officials tried their best to organize them, giving each family 2 buckets of water. For the villagers, it was a blessing beyond words. Children splashed water on their faces that night, giggling for the first time in weeks. Families took long overdue baths. The cattle drank deeply, their thirst finally quenched. That evening, Surajpur slept peacefully. A few weeks later, dark clouds began to gather. The air turned heavy, and the smell of wet soil drifted in. "Rain!" someone shouted. Villagers rushed outside as fat raindrops fell on the cracked earth. Women raised their hands to the sky, tears streaming down their faces. Children danced barefoot, laughing and screaming with joy. Even the animals seemed alive again. But the rain was short-lived. The ponds filled halfway, but it wasn't enough to secure the village's future. Relying on rain alone wasn't a solution anymore. That's when Ramu decided it was time for action. "If we keep waiting for rain or tankers, we'll suffer like this every summer," he told the villagers. "We need to save water ourselves." The panchayat called a meeting. For the first time, men, women, and even teenagers gathered together to discuss solutions. They decided to approach the government, not for handouts, but for help in building sustainable water systems. Impressed by their determination, officials approved a water conservation project. Work began immediately. The villagers dug small ponds and storage pits, working side by side. Engineers designed a large community reservoir and drainage systems. Women carried mud in baskets, men cleared stones, and children helped plant trees to hold the soil. Rainwater harvesting methods were introduced, and solar-powered pumps were installed. It wasn't easy. The scorching sun didn't spare them, and many days ended with aching backs and blistered hands. But there was hope in their hearts, a shared dream of survival. Months passed, and the results began to show. The ponds filled with clean water, and the reservoir became the village's lifeline. Farmers now had enough water to irrigate their fields. The dry lands of Surajpur turned green again. Crops flourished, and food was plentiful. With prosperity came progress. Local jobs grew, and men no longer had to migrate to distant cities for work. Electricity reached every home, and solar energy powered fans and coolers. Children, free from the burden of carrying water or working in fields, returned to school. Soon, Surajpur's story spread far and wide. Visitors came from neighboring villages to see their success. Leaders took inspiration from their model, and other drought-hit villages began following their methods. Today, Surajpur is a symbol of resilience and unity. Where once there was hunger and despair, now there is laughter and life. Clean water flows through taps. Shade trees line the streets. No parent skips meals anymore, and no child goes to bed thirsty. As the sun sets over lush green fields, the villagers of Surajpur sit together, proud of what they built. They proved that even in the harshest drought, courage and unity can turn suffering into strength. Surajpur is not just a village anymore, it's a beacon of hope.